Break free from your safe harbor and live your yes. That is the title for this week's episode with Megan Walrod. And the reason we chose this particular title is because we really explore and go in depth on what it is that actually prevents us from living our yes. What does it look like when you're not living your yes, when you're not living true to yourself, you're not living a life with joy and fulfillment? And then what can you do differently so that you can have more of that, so that you can leave that safe harbor, that status quo that you're used to leaving, and be able to be your true, full, authentic self and living in a place of peace and abundance and joy and freedom. Tune in to this week's episode to hear more on this particular topic. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. I am Kim Gross, your host, and today my guest is Megan Walrod, and I'm so excited for the conversation we are about to have. But as I normally do, I begin with a quote. So the quote is by one of my favorites. I love me some Glennon Doyle, and the quote is this: when a woman finally learns that pleasing the world is impossible, she becomes free to learn how to please herself. Oh my God, like full body chills. But we're going to pause before we jump in. And Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your story. How did you come to be where you are now, where you have created a movement of live your yes, right? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And was that always the case, living your yes?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
So
No.
do share.
Absolutely. And I love that quote. And I don't know if you can read this, but it says, do what makes you happy. That is the
Yes.
premise of Live Your Yes. And I'll drop you into the story of the right now is this is the name of my business, Live Your Yes. It's what I'm up to in the world as far as supporting, empowering, inspiring women. I call myself a self-love and confidence coach and supporting women to create a life from the inside out based on what their desires, their dreams are. And yet, exactly what you said, live your yes wasn't even in my world. It wasn't a governing force in my life up until it was a little over maybe 12, 13, 14 years ago. So I'm like in my late 30s. So dropping you into rewind that phase of my life. I had recreated my life after divorce. And I thought, here I was, strong, empowered woman, recreated my life. I am powerful. I can do this. Here I am in relationship, engaged with a man who'd been my best friend. We're growing a business together. It's on track to be six figures. Like this, I should be happy. And the divorce from my previous marriage had woken me up to how I'd been afraid to really live a life for me. Like I didn't realize this at the time during the marriage. It wasn't until the divorce, as a way of wake up call, helped me realize I had been driven by this story, unconscious, that I couldn't survive on my own as a woman, that I needed a man. And that's total programming, that's total conditioning. And so in my marriage, I'd done this thing where I was like, you get clear on what you want. What is your vision? I'll support you with that. You'll be successful. I'll take care of you. You take care of me. That's how we'll survive. I had a vision for what I wanted to do, but I didn't have belief and confidence in myself that I could do it. So I was literally the number one fan. Like he was a rock star. I'd go to his concerts. I was literally in the front row in the middle seat, like cheering him on. That was like the best metaphor for where I saw myself playing a role in life. I was the support cast. He was in the spotlight, and I would be okay if I lived that way. That relationship couldn't survive. Of course not. It exploded. I grieved it. I discovered these stories that had been operating of it wasn't about what pleased me. It was what would help me survive, making sure
Yeah.
he was
Okay.
pleased.
So let's pause there for a second
Yes.
because there
Yes.
is a theme that's been going on, coming across my radar a lot, which is this support role piece. So a
Yeah.
majority of the people that listen to this podcast are women, not all, but a majority of them are. And most are between 40 and say 55. This theme of supporting the man, such old conditioning, right? Not only just from
Totally.
society, but even just, for example, I'll share because
Yeah.
this was a huge defining moment in my life that continued to condition me to be in that supportive people pleasing role. So when I was 10 years old, I was in the fifth grade and I went to try out for the role of Snow White in the school play. Now, before that, I was used to just singing in the living room, in the kitchen, full on shows for my mom. And my mom was like happy, clapping. Like I just thought I was an amazing performer and singer. And
Uh,
so, of course, I was going to go try out for the lead of Snow
of
White. Of
course. Of
course, I'm 10,
course.
right? Like I'm going to
Yeah.
rock this.
Yes.
I know you already know what I'm going to say. So my
Yeah.
teacher was, I think he tried to be nice about it, but the message that I received and that I interpreted was, who in God's name do you think you are to be Snow White? You can't even carry a tune. No. At the end of the day, what he did say was, Kim, you can go and work on the props.
Be support.
You can be the
Be a
support role.
support.
Support the whole entire main cast. You can go paint. You can go work on the props. That was the first time that happened to me. And that particular theme continued to play out in my life for
Yeah.
a very long time. And I think the listeners could probably really resonate with this falling into the support role, especially because we're moms, right? A lot of us, not all, but many of us are moms or wives. And just from the cave days, that's how far back the conditioning goes, right? Back in tribal, what did the women do? They supported, they nurtured, they stayed back, they took care of the kids, they did the berries and so on. So while the men went out and protected and got the food. With me so far, or do you disagree at all with what I'm saying?
Well, I just think there was a time where there was a collaboration where men and women just recognized they had different skills, they had different gifts, they did it together to create something together. And then you enter into a world where there's money exchanged and it changes the dynamic because a lot of times, generally speaking, the gifts that the women were bringing to the tribe over time, like they weren't necessarily viewed as valuable
Yes.
since they might not be receiving the green money or the wherever country you are, whatever country number that they brought pink currency, the men stereotypical brought the green currency. And so the women's gifts weren't as valued. And so it was just,
Yes.
and so it was considered more support rather than an integral role to the functioning of the family and the community. So,
Yes, exactly. So it is societal conditioning
yes,
that
yes,
women
yes,
play this support role. So
yes,
support role / people pleaser, right? Because
yes,
that's what
yes.
happens. And that's what I heard you saying in your story.
Yeah,
You sat in the front row in the center, like cheering him on. Yeah, you go for
totally,
it, babe. You go for this.
totally, totally.
At that time, where were your dreams? Where were your goals?
I had this, I, we had met going to school, getting our master's degree, studying transpersonal counseling psychology. I graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my world. I was in a dark night of the soul. my saving grace personally was going through this then 3-year experience, this training. What was it called? Ceremonial arts, learning about ritual on a personal, how to create ritual and ceremony for individuals, for groups, how to use that, getting in touch with the goddesses, the divine feminine, meeting with women every month for 3 years. That was changing my life. And that was like enriching my soul life, my inner world. Yeah. On the outer world, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had all these skills in the world of counseling, and I was learning how to guide women in these deep inner journeys. But how do I make a living at it? What do I do to make money? I didn't want to work in a counseling center. I didn't want to work like in mental health. And so buried in there was, I don't know how to make a living with these gifts. So if I support my husband, he'll take care of me. I'll figure it out. I had this dream of supporting women through their major life transitions. And this is beautiful because this comes full circle with what we might get into later on in this
Yeah.
conversation about our homecoming. And yet I didn't know, I didn't have the skills for how to start my own business. I didn't know how to take these visions I was having of supporting women through their soul crossings and turn it into a viable business. Like school hadn't given me any of that. So I can pause. I can also just make note how fascinating then to me that my next relationship and what I would choose after that would lead me on this path to get all of this training in how to grow a business and market it. And for the last 15 years, that was what I was doing, supporting women with growing their businesses online. I took that weakness of my own and turn it into a strength that was a lucrative business, and helping women so that they never had to feel like, I don't know how to turn this idea into a viable, lucrative, authentic business idea. And so that was like a plot twist of my own life of, I
Yes.
don't know how to do this, so I'm going to learn it. And that also gave me the confidence and the ability to let go of depending on a man and recognize I can grow something that's viable on my own. This doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm anti-man or anything like that. It's more that I can be interdependent, not dependent, which is a huge difference.
100%. And one of the most difficult things for a people pleaser or recovering people pleaser is to feel that sense of independence, that sense
Mhm.
of freedom. Oftentimes, there's a feeling of victimhood that comes along with being the people pleaser. Not always, but very often. And then on top of it, there's this fear, right? Fear is what fuels the people pleasing
Mhm.
patterns and tendencies.
Yeah.
Fear that if I don't do what you want me to do, if I don't put your needs ahead of my own, I might be rejected. I might be abandoned. And then oftentimes that the perfectionist goes hand in hand with the people pleasing. And so there's this fear again of stepping outside of one's comfort zone, whether it be starting to create a viable business. Am I capable? Am I worthy to go
Yeah.
and build a business and support myself? Or do I need to rely on someone else to help? So there's
Yeah.
all these things. And fear can keep us mired and stuck for a long time.
I've got a story for you that
Tell
picks you
us.
up into the, okay, so that was that. And yes, so much fear is what kept me. So the marriage was that story, front row seat, cheering him on. Divorce led to the wake up call to seeing this. However, and I grieved, but within a year, I was in a new relationship again. So I'm in relationship with my best man, with my best man, with my best friend, and we were engaged. We were living together. We had this business together. From the outside in, it all looked like, wow, look at you, Megan. How fabulous. What amazing thing that you've done, created all this. But inside there was this melancholy, and inside
Mm.
there was this, I feel stuck. I feel depressed. I feel unfulfilled. What is going on here? So I entered into yet another kind of like dark night of the soul of telling myself I didn't know what was wrong and crying to my sisters, my best friend. What am I supposed to do? Literally, consciously was saying I didn't know. Unconsciously, I knew, subconsciously I knew, but there was still that fear because there was still this story that I can't survive on my own. And if I'm really honest with myself and leave this relationship, what will I do? So it wasn't until, and that went on for months until I started to have mysterious health symptoms. They thought maybe I had candida. I started to see this Ayurvedic practitioner, and that kind of turned up the heat. The story about the frog who's like in a pot of water, and if you slowly turn up the heat, it won't notice when finally it's boiling, and that's like what people pleasing can do, and this
Yeah.
like prioritizing others over ourselves. We don't realize what that's doing to us until sometimes it's too late. These mystery symptoms heated things up for me, so to say, to where it was like I got to the point one morning where I was actually finally willing to see what I'd been avoiding. So I'm sitting on the couch, he's in the bedroom sleeping, I'm journaling, I'm praying, and I'm like, universe, show me. I'm finally ready to see what is it that I haven't been willing to see. And that's when I heard, you've been living your maybe. And
Mm,
I was like, wow, safe harbor, this man, best friend. I totally did that. Like, I totally sought out a safe harbor after divorce, and I so felt the truth of that. So I'm like crying, and then I'm like, so what am I supposed to do? And I heard the three words literally like bubble up from my belly, up into my chest, live your yes. And
wow.
at this point, I was truth bumps. I was
Yeah.
laughing, yet there was like laughing, crying, feeling I had just experienced the grace of the universe, the grace of my soul, clarity of, okay, I have a compass. I wasn't quite sure what that meant at the time of to live your yes. I just came to know that what it meant was let go of what's not feeding me and fulfilling me, like have the courage to let go of what's not really lighting me up and the courage to begin really listening. This is what I learned over time. Living my yes was about listening to my heart. What is my guidance showing me? Trusting my intuition and letting that which lights me up and brings me joy to be what I prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So again, I think that I want to highlight, underscore, and
Yeah.
emphasize that
Yeah.
for some, and it was the case for me too, that the wake up call or the journey to coming home, as you said, a homecoming
Yeah.
can be, doesn't have to be, but can be slow. Like you
Yeah.
might first start to become aware because you're listening to podcasts like this one, or
Yeah.
you've read something and you're aware that you have these people pleasing, perfectionistic tendencies. You're aware that you have these feelings that you just described so beautifully, that melancholy, that unfulfillment, that, something is, I used to describe it as I felt numb. There is a
Mm,
low grade fever of numbness. While
mm,
things were improving in my life, there was still something that there's this like low grade fever. I didn't feel fully alive,
yeah,
right? And so being able to live in your yes is when you start to have that freedom to live more fully, to be more alive, to have more joy, more peace, abundance, to have all of that.
yeah,
And what I noticed was, at least for me, and it could be different for everybody, right? It could be some people have an awakening like that and it just really transforms, or it could be slow. So I just want to put that out there for someone who might be listening and say, I hear you, Kim. I hear you, Megan. But you know what? I'm aware, but I still am freaking stuck. I know that I'm feeling this. I know that I'm living in my maybe, but I can't seem to get myself into the yes. What would you say
yeah.
to that listener?
I love that question. And I'm so glad you're speaking to this because it's not like I had that moment of grace and then every thing changed and it was better like that day. Like, no, it was full transparency. It was a journey of getting clear with my truth and realizing, okay, so Let me tell you a little bit my story and then the practical tips of what helped me. So, women who are listening, if you're in that place that Kim described, I totally want to support you with a lifeline. And the truth is, the thing that was missing that had me so unfulfilled was me. The thing that was missing was me, like my power, my wisdom, what lit me up, what I really wanted to be doing. I was creating a business with him based on his business idea. Like my business was like flailing over here. And so it was a dismantling of what was and a breaking free of the safe harbor
Mm,
to then be exploring what can feel like breadcrumbs at times. And it got messy before it got better because there was the grieving the end of this relationship with each other on my own. And the things that helped me, one of my favorite go to tools is journaling. Because in journaling, we can let everything go that we haven't felt safe to say to other people. Like the thing about the people pleaser, the way I talk about this is that we get our wires crossed as women. We say yes when we mean no and no when we mean yes. So the journey of uncrossing the wires is first getting honest with ourselves. And that can happen in the journaling, because in the journaling, you can let go of that mask and say the things you might not be saying out loud. I really wanted to say no, and here's why. And I really wanted to say yes to that invitation, but I didn't. Why was that? It becomes a place where we start to bring a lot of curiosity and compassion to ourselves. For me, journaling, I actually wrote a chapter in a book all about the power of journaling and how that helped me in this divorce and then in this phase in my life. Get curious, like what were those unconscious motivators? Get clearer. What did I really want? And get courageous. What would that create if I started to actually be honest about this? So, journaling and using that as a tool and I love using journaling prompts. That's something I provide women. I have a private Facebook group where there's prompts that can help us get into the real truth. And then what I see with journaling, and I call it, there's this brave writing, brave living. The braver we're willing to be on the page with ourselves, the braver we're willing to be in our life, because then it starts to be like, okay, I can know once we're cultivating that safety with ourselves on the page, then we begin to recognize I need to speak my truth with him. So with my fiance at the time, I I realized I knew he was going to have a reaction, yet I could no longer not speak my truth with him. However, I wisely chose to speak my truth with him right before we were going to see our therapist so that I wasn't feeling responsible to hold his emotional response. I didn't, that wasn't my responsibility. Yes, I loved him. I care about him. I didn't want to see him suffering. But for the longest time, my fear of his reaction of like grief and kept me from speaking my truth. So another tip would be get support. Like
yeah.
for us at that time, it was therapy. And then it was working with a coach to help me get clear with what do I want through this? How can I make sure I'm staying true to my inner compass? And his grief of, are you sure? What if we work on this? Isn't there a way we could do this? That I didn't let that pull me into staying any longer than what was really true for me.
Yeah.
And for some women, you might be able to work on things in that relationship. Like your live your yes might look like staying in the relationship and working on it individually and together. For me, it was super clear this needed to end so that I could live the life that I was here for me and not in the context of relationship.
I do love that you're sharing that and you're such a proponent of journaling, because I would agree that it has had a profound healing impact in my own life. In fact,
Yeah.
I think I shared with you before that I'm in the process of writing a memoir, and my memoir is based on 21 years of my journals. So when I hired my ghostwriter, I gave him 21 years of my journals that he read and then wrote the memoir. So it is going to be very personal and up deep and personal. But what I want to say to that's so important, and along with what you're saying, is that
Yeah.
it was one of the most healing journeys that I've been on to take the journals and then write the book. The journaling was
Mm,
healing in and of itself at the time, but then to
yeah,
go back through the journals and then to write a book from, it's huge. It's
totally.
really huge to see on paper, to see in
Oh
black and
my
white. Like the
gosh.
proof is there of every
Yeah.
single time that I had that fear to speak up and speak my truth, you know?
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
how you found the courage to speak your truth.
And how I've and then the ultimate speaking my truth is putting it in a book form for
Totally.
everyone to read and take my
Totally.
mask off. Yeah, so I
Totally.
love
That
that.
is next level courage, Kim. Like
Thank you.
totally.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
So I love this conversation. It is really helpful. I think it's very concrete and specific in terms of using the journaling and how that can help. As we round out, I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions.
Awesome.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
I think we already maybe know the answer to this, but what is the most prominent mask that you wear or have worn? Quote unquote mask.
The people pleaser for sure was
Yeah.
one that I just, yes. Yeah.
If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
I'm headed to Bali this winter, and that's what's calling to me right now.
Nice.
That, yes.
What memory from adolescence stands out for you?
Wow.
I know that's like a heavy question. Could be a fun
Well, it's
one though.
just big. It's just big. It's like adolescence. Okay, rewind
Yeah.
adolescence. I'm having this memory of going horseback riding with my dad
Mm,
and what it was like when we had horses in our barn and how much I took it for granted.
mm.
And yeah, I loved those rides with my dad. Like I felt intimidated by him and totally like lucky, special to get to spend that time with him, just one on one.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And last one, what is your favorite way to take care of yourself?
Mm. I spend time in nature. I go for these big hikes and I just love getting lost, getting found, having my own homecoming out in nature because nature mirrors to me my true nature. And it's all masks, all barriers are just like melted. And I'm just
Yeah.
like remembering who I am and feeling so connected.
I am right there with you
Yeah.
on that one.
Yeah.
So, lastly, how can the listeners find you if they wanted to go and search for you? Where would the best place be?
Yeah, you can visit my website, meganwalrod.com, and a great way to dive right in and get a taste of me and get some free support. I actually have a 4-day online event coming up in early June called Homecoming, and it's a summit type event with a retreat type feel, and I've gathered 15 plus women together to share their stories of what I call the midlife reckoning. So it's real wisdom from real women about how do we navigate midlife, the hormonal changes, the cultural conditioning that we've received, that it's all downhill from now. Like, how do we reckon with those stories, the people pleasing that is often what's been driving our life? How to have a reckoning that's actually an invitation to step into more power, more wisdom. And so I'm super excited about it because it's coming out of my own experience with my midlife reckoning. So you can join us for that. It's free. That's at meganwalrod.com/homecoming. I have a podcast too, The Megan Walrod Show, if you want to listen to that. I've got some group coaching coming up this summer. So there's a lot of different ways. I have my own debut novel coming out, but not until next summer, around the time possibly of yours. That's my own journey through, it's like biographical, but not told in a fiction setting. So that gives you a range for whatever might tug at you, invitation to honor that calling.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll
Yeah.
have all of that in the show notes, of course.
Thank you.
And I love that idea about the summit for sure. I've had my reckoning. So I know, I just know how powerful it is to have that reckoning and then to have that transformation. and come out of, as you said a couple of times in the podcast, the dark night of the soul, coming out on the other end
Yeah.
and just having that freedom. So I really appreciate you coming on today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. Such a juicy conversation, and just so grateful that you're doing this and catalyzing these conversations. Because the more that we as women recognize it's a thing, like it's a universal thing, it can help melt the shame and
Yeah.
allow for more conversations, which is so essential. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode. And as Megan just said, if you want more of Megan, if you want more of Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists, go out there, subscribe, leave us a review, comment, let us know if there was something in particular in this conversation that really piqued something for you and you want to hear more. Let us know in the comments. We'll come back and do a
Totally.
round two. We can have a part two. So
Yeah.
really appreciate, go ahead.
Can I share one thing just as a
Yes,
tip
please.
for listeners? Because we've talked
Please.
about do more of what makes you happy, live your
Yes.
yes, prioritize yourself. We've talked about journaling. And yet, one of the things I know for myself back when I was feeling stuck, unfulfilled, I was like, I don't know what brings me happy. I don't know what brings me joy. So here's some home play for you. Grab a journal and start a top 10 list or a
Mm.
top 100 list. It's like your inventory of what brings you joy. Is it tropical settings, what we have with Kim? Is it the color sea foam? Is it having plants? Is it your kitty cat? And just having that reminder of what are those things that bring you joy, nature, and then including that in the moments in your day to spark that joy. So I just wanted to offer that as a tangible take home. Let that
Yes.
become part of your life. Thank you.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. It was beautiful. Thank you for adding that in. Okay, everybody. So thank you again so much for tuning in. And I will see you next week on Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists.